Corinne stood at the edge of the infinity pool, champagne glass trembling in her manicured hand, staring at the boy in the worn jacket who shouldn't have been there. Behind her, 200 guests whispered and pointed. The boy smiled, not with nervousness but with the quiet certainty of someone holding all the cards. When he reached into his pocket, Corinne's perfectly constructed world began to crack. She didn't know his name yet, but in 60 seconds everyone would know hers. The Ashford estate sprawled across 6 acres of prime, Beverly Hills real estate like a monument to excess. Every blade of grass had been positioned by landscape architects flown in from Japan. The infinity pool reflected the sunset in shades of gold and crimson, a liquid mirror that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Tonight, it hosted the social event of the season, Preston and Corinne Ashford's 20th wedding anniversary, a celebration designed not to commemorate love, but to demonstrate power. Corinne Ashford stood in her walk-in closet, larger than many studio apartments, adjusting the diamond choker that encircled her throat like a glittering collar. At 43, she'd maintained the appearance of wealth with the dedication of a full-time job. Pilates at dawn, dermatologist appointments twice monthly, a personal nutritionist who regulated every calorie. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, each strand coaxed into place by her stylist. Her dress, a custom Valentino worth $40,000, hugged curves sculpted by both genetics and Dr. Morrison's discreet surgical interventions. "You look stunning, darling," Preston said from the doorway, though his eyes were on his phone. Preston Ashford hadn't built his fortune. He'd inherited it, then expanded it through real estate ventures that displaced thousands while generating millions. At 47, he'd grown comfortable in his power, his once athletic frame now softened by expensive lunches and rare scotch. His tuxedo hid the evidence of excess with expert tailoring. "The Hendersons just arrived," he continued, thumbs moving across the screen. "And Senator Blackwell confirmed. This is going to be perfect, Corinne, absolutely perfect." Perfect? Corinne had built her life around that word. Perfect house, perfect marriage, perfect reputation. She'd climbed from a middle-class childhood in Ohio to the heights of Lowe's Angels Society through careful calculation and ruthless social maneuvering. Every friendship was strategic. Every charity gala was networking. Every smile was currency. "Have the caterers set up the raw bar?" she asked, applying lipstick with surgical precision. "3 hours ago, relax." Preston finally looked up, irritation flickering across his features. "You've planned this for 6 months, it'll be fine." But Corinne couldn't relax. Perfection required constant vigilance. One wrong move, one social misstep, and the whispers would start. In their world, reputation was everything. She'd seen dynasties crumble over bad press, fortunes evaporate when the right people stopped taking your calls. Downstairs, the party was already in motion. 200 guests glided through rooms filled with art worth millions, their laughter polished and practiced. Servers in crisp white jackets circulated with champagne and canapés. A string quartet played near the pool, their music drifting across water that caught the last rays of sunset. "Corinne, darling," Melissa Chen appeared, air-kissing both of Corinne's cheeks with the efficiency of a social machine. Melissa ran the most influential charity board in Lowe's Angels, a position she wielded like a weapon. "This is absolutely magnificent. You've outdone yourself." "You're too kind," Corinne said, her smile automatic. "How's the foundation gala coming along?" "Wonderfully, though we're still finalizing the guest list. I've been meaning to talk to you about that, actually." They spoke in the coded language of their class, discussing donations and committee positions while really negotiating influence and access. Corinne had learned the dialect perfectly, erasing any trace of her Ohio accent, her working-class childhood, the girl who'd once served drinks at parties like this instead of hosting them. Near the pool, Preston held court with a cluster of investors and politicians. Senator Blackwell, facing a tight re-election, laughed too loudly at Preston's jokes. Real estate mogul David Chen discussed zoning laws that would make them both richer. Tech entrepreneur Marcus West, newly wealthy and eager to be accepted, listened with the desperation of someone trying to buy their way into a closed circle. The West Side development is moving forward, Preston was saying, his voice carrying across the water. We broke ground last month. 200 luxury units, penthouses starting at $8 million. What about the tenants? Marcus asked. I heard there was some resistance. Preston waved a dismissive hand. Handled. They were month to month, mostly Section 8. We gave them 60 days notice, perfectly legal. They'll find somewhere else. The men nodded. In their world, displacement was just business. The apartments Preston demolished had housed families for generations. Teachers, nurses, janitors, the invisible people who kept the city running. Now they'd be scattered across the city, their communities destroyed, their commutes doubled, so that wealthy buyers could have rooftop pools and city views. Preston always thinks 3 steps ahead, Senator Blackwell said, raising his glass. To our host, a true visionary. They drank. None of them noticed the boy standing at the edge of the property. He was perhaps 17 or 18, tall but thin, wearing jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. His dark hair fell across his forehead and his eyes, intelligent, alert, calculating, took in everything. The mansion, the guests, the excess. The security guard stationed at the entrance noticed him first. Hey, kid, this is a private event. You need to move along. The boy didn't move. He stood there, hands in his pockets, perfectly still. I said move along. The guard started forward, one hand moving toward his radio. Then the boy smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile or an apologetic smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something no one else did. I'm here for the party, he said quietly. His voice carried an unexpected quality, educated, articulate, at odds with his appearance. This is invitation only. You got an invitation. The boy reached into his jacket pocket. The guard tensed, his hand moving to his belt. But the boy pulled out only a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly, displaying what appeared to be a printed invitation. The guard squinted at it in the dimming light. It looked legitimate, the Ashford crest, the calligraphy, the details. Still. What's your name, kid? Lucas. The boy Lucas held the guard's gaze. Lucas Ashford. The guard's hand froze. Ashford. Preston and Corinne didn't have children. That was well known. Corinne had devoted herself to her social career instead of motherhood, a choice she defended at countless brunches and fundraisers. That's impossible. Is it? Lucas stepped forward, and something in his movement made the guard step back. Maybe you should ask them. Before the guard could respond, Lucas walked past him, through the gate, onto the property. His worn sneakers left faint prints on the pristine stone pathway. He moved with purpose, threading through clusters of guests who didn't notice him at first, just another young person, maybe a caterer's assistant or valet driver. But as he walked, people began to turn. His clothes were wrong, too casual for the formal event. His presence was wrong, unfamiliar in a gathering where everyone knew everyone else. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The music played on, but attention shifted like a tide. Corinne saw him from across the pool. Her glass stopped halfway to her lips. Who was that, and why did something about him seem familiar? Lucas reached the edge of the infinity pool and stopped. The sunset painted the water in impossible colors, amber, rose, violet. Behind him, the string quartet fell silent, sensing the shift in atmosphere. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward this boy who didn't belong. Preston noticed the quiet and looked up from his conversation. His face went pale. Preston, Senator Blackwell asked, "What's wrong?" Corinne started walking toward the pool, her heels clicking on stone. Around her, guests began to murmur. Who was this boy? Why was he here? Was this some kind of stunt? Lucas stood perfectly still, waiting. His hands remained in his pockets. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He was patient, like someone who'd waited a long time and could wait a little longer. Karen reached the pool's edge, 10 feet from the boy. Up close, she could see details: the threadbare cuffs of his jacket, the careful patch on his jeans, the too long hair that needed cutting, but also the intelligence in his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the way he carried himself with quiet dignity despite his poverty. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the whispers. "How did you get in here?" Lucas met her gaze. "You don't recognize me." "Should I?" "Yes," that smile again, sad and knowing. "You should." Preston pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger and something else, fear. "Security, get this kid out of here." The guard who'd let Lucas through appeared, radio already in hand. But Lucas raised a hand, a small gesture that somehow commanded attention. "Before you throw me out," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent party, "there's something everyone here should know." He reached into his jacket pocket again. Karen's heart hammered. "Preston, do something." But Preston stood frozen, staring at the boy with an expression Karen had never seen on her husband's face: recognition. Lucas pulled out a photograph. It was worn, creased from being carried for years. He held it up so everyone could see. The photograph showed a younger Preston Ashford, maybe 25, still in college, with his arm around a pretty young woman with kind eyes. She was clearly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. They stood in front of a modest apartment building, smiling at the camera with genuine happiness. "My mother," Lucas said quietly, "Maria Santos. She worked as a waitress at the country club where Preston played golf. They dated for 2 years. When she got pregnant, he promised to marry her." The silence was absolute. Karen felt the earth tilt beneath her feet. "That's a lie," Preston shouted, but his voice cracked. "I've never seen this boy before." "Really?" Lucas reached into his pocket again and pulled out more photographs. A birthday card signed "Love, Dad." Report cards with encouraging notes in Preston's handwriting. A check for $500 with Preston's signature, dated just 2 months ago. "Because you've been sending my mother money every month for 18 years. Not much, just enough to keep her quiet. Just enough to make sure I never came looking for you." Karen's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the stone, crystal exploding in 1,000 pieces. She didn't hear it. She was staring at her husband, seeing him for the first time. Preston's face had gone from red to white. "Karen, I can explain. You have a son." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's not what you think. You have a son, and you never told me." The guests were riveted now, their social masks slipping to reveal naked fascination. This was better than any reality show, any gossip column. This was a scandal unfolding in real time. Lucas continued, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of pain. "My mother died 3 weeks ago, cancer. She spent everything on treatments, but it wasn't enough. At the end, she told me everything. About Preston, about how he abandoned us, about the payoff money he sent every month with letters warning her to never contact him, to never tell anyone, to never ruin his real life." He turned to face the crowd, and Karen saw tears in his eyes. But his voice remained controlled. "She made me promise not to come here. She said it would only cause pain, but I'm 18 now. I graduate high school in 2 weeks. I have a scholarship to USC, worked my ass off for it while working 2 jobs to help pay for Mom's treatments. I've spent my whole life watching my father from a distance, watching him live in this." He gestured at the mansion, the pool, the excess. "While my mother and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hawthorne and worried about making rent." "This is ridiculous," Preston said, but his voice was weak. "Karen, don't listen to this. He's obviously after money, some kind of scam." "Is it a scam?" Lucas pulled out one more document. Even from a distance, Karen could see the official seal. "Because I had a DNA test done. Paid for it with my last paycheck from the grocery store where I work nights. 99.9% match. Want to see it?" He held out the paper. Preston didn't take it. Corinne felt something break inside her chest. 20 years. 20 years of marriage, and she'd never known. All those nights Preston worked late, was he visiting this woman? All those business trips, was he living a double life? And how many other secrets had he kept? "Why now?" Melissa Chen asked, her voice sharp with the scent of fresh gossip. "Why come here tonight?" Lucas looked at her, then back at Corinne. "Because my mother is dead, because I'm alone now, and because everyone in this city, everyone at this party, should know what kind of man Preston Ashford really is." He pulled out his phone, holding it up. The screen showed a voice recording app. "I'm recording this. In California, only one party needs to consent to recording. That's me. And by tomorrow morning, this whole conversation will be online. Every news outlet will have a copy. Every business associate, every investor, every political connection." Preston lunged forward, reaching for the phone. Lucas stepped back smoothly, pocketing the device. "Touch me and it's assault," Lucas said calmly, "in front of 200 witnesses." Preston stopped, his hands shaking. Senator Blackwell was already backing away, phone in hand, no doubt texting his campaign manager. The other guests watched with a mix of horror and delight. They'd witnessed the fall of a king. Corinne stood at the edge of her perfectly constructed world and watched it crumble. The diamond choker felt like it was choking her. The Valentino dress felt like a costume. Everything, the house, the party, the carefully curated life, was a lie. She looked at Lucas, really looked at him. Now she could see it. The shape of his jaw was Preston's, the color of his eyes, the way he stood. This boy was her husband's son, undeniable, real. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, and he was looking at her now, not Preston. "I know this isn't your fault, but I couldn't let him pretend anymore. My mother deserved better. She loved him, and he threw her away like trash." His voice finally cracked on those last words. The boy's careful control slipped, revealing the grief underneath. He'd lost his mother. He was alone, and he'd come here not just for revenge, but for acknowledgement, for the father who'd denied his existence. Corinne felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. Then she looked at Preston, and the sympathy turned to rage. "Get out," she said quietly. Preston blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house. Get out of my sight. Get out of my life." Her voice rose with each word, years of repressed emotion finally breaking free. "You lied to me. For 20 years you lied to me. You had a child, a son, and you hid him like he was something shameful. You let me believe we were building something together while you were paying off your mistakes." "Corinne, please." "Did you love her?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "This Maria, did you love her?" Preston's silence was answer enough. Corinne laughed, a broken sound. "You loved her and you married me. Why? For my connections, for my family's money." Her father had invested heavily in Preston's early ventures, Corinne suddenly remembered. Millions of dollars that had helped build the Ashford empire. "I was useful. She was poor. So you kept her hidden and married me instead." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Preston? Explain it to me. Explain it to everyone here." She gestured at the crowd of guests, none of whom had left. Why would they? This was the best entertainment they'd had in years. Preston's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. What could he say? The evidence was standing right in front of him, wearing his face. Lucas watched the scene unfold with careful attention. This was what he'd come for, not money, not acknowledgement, but this. Exposure. Consequence. Justice for his mother who'd loved a man who'd abandoned her. "You should go," Corinne said to Lucas, her voice gentler now. "This isn't your fault, but you've done what you came to do." Lucas nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Ashford, my mother said you didn't know. She didn't want to hurt you. She was a good person." "Better than me, clearly." Corinne's smile was bitter. "I built my whole life on appearances. She built hers on love. Who made the better choice?" Lucas didn't answer. He turned and walked away, back through the crowd that parted for him like water. His sneakers squeaked on the stone. His worn jacket seemed shabby against the tuxedos and designer gowns, but he walked with his head high, dignity in every step. The security guard didn't try to stop him this time. After Lucas disappeared through the gate, the party remained frozen for a long moment. Then, like a dam breaking, everyone started talking at once. Phones appeared. Social media lit up. By the time the guests began to leave, no one wanted to stay now. The spectacle was over. The story was already spreading across Los Angeles like wildfire. Karen stood alone by the pool, watching the sunset fade to darkness. Around her, caterers began cleaning up a party that had died before it could truly begin. The raw bar sat untouched. The custom cake remained uncut. The champagne grew warm in its bottles. Preston tried to approach her once. She held up a hand, stopping him without words. He retreated to his study, probably calling his lawyer. Damage control, crisis management, but some things couldn't be managed away. As the last guests departed, Melissa Chen paused beside Karen. "I'm sorry," she said, and for once she sounded genuine. "For what it's worth, you didn't deserve this." "Didn't I?" Karen stared at her reflection in the pool. The water was still now a dark mirror. "I built my life on surfaces, on appearances, on perfect illusions. Maybe this is just the truth catching up." Melissa had no response to that. She left, heels clicking away into the night. Alone, Karen removed her diamond choker and dropped it beside the pool. It landed with a small splash, sinking into the water. $40,000 worth of jewelry swallowed by the dark. She didn't care. She thought about Lucas, driving away to whatever small apartment he called home. Alone now, without his mother. Working 2 jobs while going to school. Fighting for every opportunity while Preston threw money away on parties and cars and mistresses. Were there others? Had Maria been the only one? Karen walked into the mansion, past the artwork worth millions, through rooms designed to impress. Everything suddenly felt hollow, empty, a beautiful shell with nothing inside. In Preston's study, she could hear him arguing with someone on the phone. His voice was desperate, pleading. She didn't care about that either. She climbed the stairs to their bedroom and locked the door. Tomorrow, she'd call her lawyer. Tomorrow, she'd start dismantling the lie her marriage had been. Tomorrow, she'd figure out who she was without Preston, without this life. But tonight, she sat in the dark and thought about a boy she'd met for 10 minutes. A boy who destroyed her perfect world with nothing but the truth. Karen woke to her phone vibrating like an angry insect. She'd forgotten to turn it off, a mistake she'd never made before. The screen glowed in the pre-dawn darkness of the guest bedroom where she'd finally fallen asleep around 3 a.m. 53 missed calls, 147 texts, 36 voicemails. She reached for the phone with a hand that felt disconnected from her body, operated by remote control. The first text was from Melissa Chen, sent at 6:02 a.m. "Oh my God, Karen, turn on the news. I'm so sorry." Karen's fingers fumbled with the remote. The bedroom TV flickered to life, sound muted. For a moment she saw only a commercial for laundry detergent, bright, cheerful, obscene in its normalcy. Then the news returned. Her own face filled the screen. It was footage from last night, crystal clear despite the darkness. Someone had filmed everything. Of course they had. In their world, everyone documented everything, always ready to weaponize someone else's misery for clicks and shares and status. The video showed Lucas standing by the pool holding up the photograph. It showed Preston lunging forward. It showed Karen's champagne glass shattering. But most of all, it showed Karen's face as she learned the truth, the shock, the pain, the crumbling of everything she'd believed. Her devastation, broadcast for the world to consume. Karen unmuted the TV with shaking hands. "Stunning revelation that has rocked Los Angeles high society," the news anchor was saying, her voice pitched with false concern. Preston Ashford, real estate mogul and philanthropist, has been revealed to have a secret son from a previous relationship. The dramatic confrontation at last night's anniversary party was captured on video and has already been viewed over 2 million times. The screen split, Karen's face on one side, Luca's on the other. The photo caption read, "The Unknown Son." The young man, identified as Lucas Santos, claims he is 18 years old and the product of a relationship between Ashford and Maria Santos, a waitress who died of cancer earlier this month. According to Santos, Preston Ashford has been secretly supporting them financially for nearly 2 decades while hiding their existence from his wife, prominent socialite Karen Ashford. The anchor switched, a male voice now deeper, more authoritative. "We've obtained court documents showing that Lucas Santos filed for a DNA test through the Superior Court 2 weeks ago. Sources close to the investigation confirm that the results show a 99.9% probability that Preston Ashford is indeed the father. Ashford's lawyers have declined to comment, but we have this statement from Lucas Santos himself, recorded last night." Lucas appeared on screen. He was sitting in what looked like a modest living room, the video clearly shot on a phone. His eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice was steady. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted people to know the truth about my mother and me. Maria Santos was a good woman. She loved my father, and he abandoned her when she got pregnant. For 18 years, he pretended we didn't exist while he lived in a mansion, and I shared a 1-bedroom apartment with my mom. She died working 2 jobs, trying to pay for cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Meanwhile, my father threw parties that cost more than we earned in 5 years. I'm not looking for money or sympathy. I just want him to acknowledge what he did, to admit that my mother's life mattered, that I matter." The screen cut to footage of the Ashford mansion, photographed in harsh morning light that made it look less like a dream home and more like a monument to obscenity. Karen watched aerials of the property. The 6 acres, the infinity pool, the tennis courts, the 3-car garage housing Preston's collection of luxury vehicles. Then the footage switched to a different building, a worn apartment complex in Hawthorne, the neighborhood Lucas had mentioned. Peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, bars on the windows. The contrast was devastating. "This is where Lucas Santos grew up," the anchor intoned. "A 1-bedroom apartment renting for $1,200 a month. Neighbors describe him as hardworking and polite. His high school principal issued a statement calling him an exemplary student who maintained a 4.2 GPA while working 2 part-time jobs to help support his family." More footage. Lucas in a grocery store uniform stocking shelves. Lucas at his high school, wearing jeans and a simple shirt, carrying a heavy backpack. Lucas at a bus stop, waiting in the rain. The news had moved fast. They'd done their research overnight, painting a picture of struggling nobility versus wealthy corruption. It was a perfect story, the kind that made people furious, that went viral, that destroyed reputations. "The question everyone is asking," the anchor continued, "is how much did Karen Ashford know? Was she complicit in hiding Lucas Santos, or was she another victim of Preston Ashford's deception?" Karen's phone exploded with a fresh wave of notifications. The world wanted answers. The world wanted blood. She turned off the TV and sat in darkness, listening to the phone buzz. Beyond her locked door, she could hear movement in the house. Preston was awake. She heard his voice, muffled but urgent, probably on another call with his lawyers. Karen looked at herself in the mirror across the room. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The perfect hair was matted. The flawless makeup had run and smeared. The Valentino dress lay crumpled on the floor where she'd stepped out of it at 4 a.m., too exhausted to hang it properly. She wore only underwear and yesterday's face, stripped down to nothing. Who was she without the costume? A knock on the door. Karen, we need to talk," Preston's voice hoarse with strain. She didn't answer. "Karen, please. My lawyer needs to know what you're going to say if reporters call. We need to coordinate our response." Coordinate their response. Not "I'm sorry," not "I can explain," not "how can I make this right," just "let's get our stories straight." Go away, Preston. We're going to get through this. It's just a scandal. It'll blow over. We just need to control the narrative. Control the narrative. Karen was on her feet, rage flooding through her veins like rocket fuel. She crossed the room and yanked open the door. Preston stumbled back, startled by her fury. You have a son, a child you hid from me for 20 years, and you want to control the narrative. Preston looked terrible. His hair stood up in chaotic angles. His eyes were bloodshot. He still wore last night's tuxedo pants and dress shirt, now rumpled and stained. He looked every one of his 47 years and then some. I never meant to hurt you, he said weakly. But you did. You lied to me every single day of our marriage, every morning when you said, I love you, every anniversary when we pretended to be happy, every time I defended you to my friends, to my family. It was all a lie. It wasn't all a lie. I do love you, Corinne. I chose you. The words hit her like a slap. You chose me. You chose me because I was useful, my father's money, my connections, my ability to open doors you couldn't open yourself. That's why you chose me. Preston's silence confirmed it. Corinne laughed, a horrible sound. My God, I knew our marriage was strategic. I knew we were partners more than lovers, but I thought there was something real underneath. Some foundation of respect or affection or shared goals. But there was nothing was there. Just calculation, just use. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about Maria Santos. Let's talk about your son. Did you ever love her, Preston? Tell me the truth for once in your miserable life. Preston's face crumpled. And there it was, the truth Corinne had already known but needed to hear. Yes, he whispered, I loved her, but she was. Poor Sayed. She wasn't from our world. My parents would have disowned me. My trust fund would have been cut off. I would have lost everything. So you threw her away and married me instead, the socially acceptable choice. I thought I could make it work. I thought I could support her quietly, be part of my son's life from a distance, and still have the life I was supposed to have. I thought I could have both. You thought you could have everything without consequences. You thought you could keep your perfect reputation while the mother of your child worked herself to death. You thought no one would find out. Corinne felt something cold settle in her chest. All these years she'd thought she was so clever, so sophisticated, navigating high society with skill and precision. But she'd been blind. Willfully, intentionally blind. I need to know, she said quietly. Were there others, other women, other secrets? Preston looked away. Tell me. A few, nothing serious, just diversions. Diversions, like human beings were entertainment to be used and discarded. Corinne thought of all the times Preston had traveled for business, all the late nights at the office, all the conferences and golf trips. How many diversions had there been? Get out, she said. Pack a bag and get out of this house. I'm calling my lawyer today. Corinne, wait. Get out. Something in her voice made Preston flinch. He nodded slowly and shuffled away toward their bedroom, his bedroom now. Corinne returned to the guest room and locked the door again. She looked at her phone. Among the missed calls was one from her father, sent at 6:15 a.m. Richard Drake was a formidable man, a self-made millionaire who'd built his fortune in manufacturing and invested heavily in Preston's real estate ventures. He'd given his blessing to the marriage 20 years ago, seeing Preston as an ambitious young man who'd take care of his daughter. Corinne called him back. He answered on the first ring, Corinne. Hi, Daddy. A long pause, then, are you okay? The question, asked with genuine concern, almost broke her. No. I'm flying in today. I'll be there by noon. You don't have to. Yes, I do. My daughter needs me. I'm coming. Corinne felt tears spill down her cheeks. Thank you. And Corinne, I need you to know something. I invested in Preston because of his ambition, yes, but I gave my blessing to your marriage because I thought he loved you. If I'd known about any of this," his voice hardened. "I'm pulling my investments, every cent. He used my money to build his empire while hiding a child, while cheating on my daughter. He's done." "Daddy, you'll lose millions." "I don't care. Some things matter more than money. Family matters, integrity matters. Preston Ashford has neither." After they hung up, Corinne sat with the phone in her hand, processing what her father had said. Preston's empire was built on a complex web of investments and loans. If Richard Drake pulled out and convinced his associates to do the same, Preston's businesses would collapse. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Let it burn. By 10 a.m., the story had metastasized. It wasn't just local news anymore. National outlets had picked it up. Cable news devoted entire segments to it. Social media was on fire. The hashtag Ashford scandal was trending worldwide. Corinne's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She'd stopped answering, but the calls kept coming. Friends, former friends, she thought bitterly, wanting details. Reporters demanding statements. Lawyers offering representation. PR firms promising they could fix this. Nothing could fix this. She forced herself to shower and dress. Simple jeans and a sweater, no makeup, no jewelry. The woman in the mirror looked younger somehow, stripped of artifice, more real. Downstairs, she found Preston in his study, surrounded by lawyers. 3 men in expensive suits, their briefcases open, papers everywhere. They fell silent when she appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Ashford," one of them said, standing, "we were just discussing strategy." "I don't care about your strategy. Preston," I called my lawyer, "we're filing for divorce today. I want a full financial accounting of all assets. I want details on every property, every investment, every bank account. And I want documentation of every payment you made to Maria Santos." Preston's face went gray. "Corinne, please, we can work this out." "No, we can't. This marriage is over. The only question now is how much of your empire survives what you've done." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "Mrs. Ashford, we should discuss this privately. In divorce proceedings, communications between spouses can be." "I don't care what you think. I'm not coordinating with Preston anymore. Get your own lawyers. Fight me in court if you want. But I'm done pretending." She turned and walked away, leaving them staring after her. In the kitchen, the cook and housekeeper were huddled around a tablet, watching news coverage. They jumped apart when Corinne entered, guilt written on their faces. "It's fine," Corinne said tiredly. "Watch whatever you want. I know everyone's talking about it." The cook, Elena, had worked for them for 12 years. She was a kind woman from Colombia who sent money back to her family every month. She looked at Corinne with something like sympathy. "Mrs. Corinne, I'm so sorry. This is a terrible thing." "Did you know?" Corinne asked suddenly. "Did Preston ever say anything, bring anyone here?" Elena shook her head firmly. "Never, Mr. Preston. He never talk about personal things with us. We only know what we see on news." Corinne believed her. Preston was too careful, too paranoid about maintaining his image. He'd kept his secret well hidden from everyone, even his own wife. "Elena, I might need to let some staff go. When the divorce is final, I won't be able to afford to maintain this house. I'm sorry." "Is okay, Mrs. Corinne. We understand. You are good boss. We find other work." The doorbell rang. Corinne tensed. Reporters, probably. They'd been gathering at the gate since dawn, cameras and microphones ready to capture any movement. But when she checked the security monitor, she saw her father's familiar Mercedes pulling up the circular driveway. Richard Drake emerged, tall and stern, his silver hair impeccable despite the 6-hour flight from San Francisco. He saw the cameras at the gate and his jaw tightened. Corinne opened the door before he could knock. "Daddy." He pulled her into a fierce hug. At 68, Richard Drake was still formidable, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered with the bearing of someone who'd fought his way up from nothing and feared no one. He held his daughter like she was precious, and for the first time since last night, Corinne felt safe. "Let's go inside," he said, "away from the cameras." In the living room, Richard listened while Corinne explained everything. She left nothing out. The party, Lucas's arrival, the DNA test, Preston's confession about Maria and the other women. Her father's face grew darker with each revelation. "Where is he now?" Richard asked quietly. When her father spoke quietly, it was more frightening than shouting. "In his study with lawyers." "Good, he should enjoy their company. He'll be needing them." Richard pulled out his phone and made several calls. Corinne listened as he spoke with his lawyer, his accountant, his business partners. Each conversation was brief and brutal. "Pull everything out of Ashford Properties. Yes, immediately. I don't care about penalties. Review every contract we have with Preston Ashford. Find any clause that allows us to terminate. Use them all. Call the board. Emergency meeting. I'm recommending we divest entirely from anything connected to Ashford." When he finished, he turned to Corinne. "I've been in business 50 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. Preston's empire is built on relationships and reputation. By tomorrow, he'll have neither." "He'll be ruined," Corinne said. She waited to feel guilty about that. The guilt didn't come. "He should have thought of that before he abandoned his child, before he lied to my daughter." Richard's eyes were ice. "Some mistakes have consequences. He's about to learn that lesson." They talked for an hour, making plans. Corinne would move into her father's apartment in San Francisco until the divorce was final. She'd start over, maybe go back to school, maybe start a business of her own, maybe just figure out who she was without Preston's name attached to hers. "What about Lucas?" her father asked. "The boy, what are you going to do about him?" Corinne had been thinking about that all morning. "I want to meet him, properly, not like last night." "Why?" "Because he's Preston's son. Because he deserves to know that not everyone in this family is a monster, and because—" she paused, trying to articulate the feeling. "Because he had the courage to tell the truth, even though it cost him everything. He could have stayed silent, taken Preston's money, lived quietly. But he didn't. He stood up in front of 200 people and exposed what was wrong. That takes strength." Richard studied his daughter with something like pride. "You're stronger than I thought, Corinne. Stronger than you thought, too." "I don't feel strong, I feel destroyed." That's when you find out what you're really made of, when everything falls apart. At 2 p.m., Corinne's lawyer arrived. Sheila Goldman was a shark in Chanel, 60 years old, iron-gray hair, and a reputation for annihilating opponents in divorce court. She'd represented 3 of Corinne's friends in their divorces, securing settlements that left their ex-husbands broke and bitter. They met in the dining room, spreading papers across the mahogany table that had hosted so many dinner parties. Sheila worked quickly, marking documents, asking questions, building their case. "California is a community property state," she explained. "Everything acquired during the marriage is split 50-50. But we can argue that Preston's concealment of assets, specifically the payments to Maria Santos, constitutes fraud. If we can prove he was hiding money, we can go after his separate property too." "I don't want to destroy him," Corinne said. "I just want out." "Corinne, honey," Sheila looked at her over cat-eye glasses. "He destroyed you first, on camera, in front of everyone you know. Your reputation is in tatters. Your social standing is gone. You need to protect yourself financially because this is going to get ugly." Corinne thought about Lucas, working 2 jobs while going to school. She thought about Maria Santos, dying of cancer while worrying about rent. She thought about Preston, throwing parties that cost $50,000 while his son rode the bus. "You're right," she said, "get everything." They worked for 3 hours. By the time Sheila left, Corinne had signed initial paperwork, frozen joint accounts, and put holds on credit cards. Preston would wake up tomorrow unable to access most of their liquid assets. He'd have to liquidate investments, sell properties, borrow money. Good. At 6 p.m., Preston finally emerged from his study. His lawyers had left through the back entrance, avoiding the cameras that still camped at the gate. He looked haggard, defeated. "Corinne, we need to talk about finances. My accounts are frozen. I can't access." "I know, I froze them." "You can't do that. I have payroll to make, contractors to pay." "Talk to your lawyers. And Preston, pack enough for a few months. You're not coming back here." "This is my house." "This is our house, acquired during our marriage with my father's money. My lawyer will be filing paperwork tomorrow to have you removed from the property. You can fight it if you want, but it will be public and expensive and you will lose." Preston stared at her with something like desperation. "When did you become so cold?" "When I realized I'd wasted 20 years of my life on a man who saw me as a transaction instead of a person. When I learned that everything I built was a lie. When I discovered my husband had a son he was ashamed of." She stood up, facing him across the dining room table covered in legal documents. "You want to know what's really sad, Preston? I could have forgiven the affair. I could have forgiven hiding Lucas, maybe, if you told me the truth eventually. But you know what I can't forgive? You never loved me, not really. I was just useful. And when I wasn't useful anymore, when my father's money was spent and my connections were established, you went looking for diversions." "That's not true. I did love you in my way." "Your way isn't enough. Your way is selfish and small and cruel, and I'm done with it." Preston opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. What could he say? She was right, and they both knew it. He left to pack. Corinne sat alone in the dining room as twilight deepened outside. Through the windows, she could see the infinity pool, still and perfect. Last night, it had reflected a party full of beautiful people. Tonight, it reflected only emptiness. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Ashford, this is Lucas Santos. I wanted to apologize for what happened at your party. I didn't mean to hurt you. If you ever want to talk, I'm willing to listen. I understand if you hate me." Corinne stared at the message for a long time. This boy, young man, really, had detonated her life. But he hadn't done it for money or fame. He'd done it because his mother died and he was alone, and he needed his father to acknowledge his existence. How could she hate him for that? She typed back carefully. "Lucas, you don't owe me an apology. Your father does. I would like to meet with you if you're willing. Not to fight or argue, just to talk. You deserve better than what Preston gave you. We both do." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came 2 minutes later. "I'd like that. Thank you for not hating me." Corinne set down the phone and smiled sadly. Tomorrow, the divorce would begin. Tomorrow, her carefully constructed life would officially end. Tomorrow, she'd start figuring out who Corinne Drake was, separate from Corinne Ashford. But tonight, she'd done one thing right. She'd extended kindness to a boy who'd been shown none by his own father. That was something. A small act of decency in the wreckage of everything else. It would have to be enough. Upstairs, she heard Preston dragging suitcases across hardwood floors. The sound of an empire crumbling, one bag at a time. The coffee shop Lucas had suggested was a deliberate choice. Far from Beverly Hills, in a working-class neighborhood where no one would recognize either of them. Or so Corinne hoped. She arrived 20 minutes early, driving her own car. A Range Rover she'd insisted on keeping when Preston tried to negotiate vehicles in their separation. The neighborhood was exactly as different from her usual haunts as possible. Strip malls with faded signs, modest homes with chain-link fences, a street lined with 20-year-old economy cars instead of this year's luxury models. The coffee shop, Rosa's Cafe, was clean but worn. Linoleum floors scarred by decades of foot traffic, plastic chairs patched with duct tape, a handwritten menu board advertising café con leche and pan dulce. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon hung in the air, warm and honest. Corinne felt conspicuous in her tailored slacks and cashmere sweater, even though she deliberately dressed down. The few other customers, an elderly man reading a Spanish newspaper, two young mothers with toddlers, a teenager doing homework, glanced at her with curiosity but not recognition. Good. She ordered coffee she didn't want and sat at a corner table, watching the door. Her hands shook slightly. She pressed them flat against the table, willing them still. 3 days had passed since the party. 3 days that felt like 3 years. The news cycle had moved with dizzying speed. First shock, then analysis, then the inevitable think pieces about wealth inequality, secret families, and the moral bankruptcy of the upper class. Corinne's face had been everywhere, immortalized in that moment of shattering realization. She deleted her social media accounts. Too many comments, too much viciousness. Some people expressed sympathy for her, another victim of Preston's lies, but just as many blamed her, arguing she must have known, must have looked the other way for money and status. The judgment was brutal and inescapable. Preston had moved out 2 days ago, taking only clothes and essentials. He tried once more to negotiate, to argue, to convince Corinne they could salvage something. She'd stared at him with dead eyes until he left. Her lawyer had filed divorce papers that afternoon. The media had gone after Preston with gleeful ferocity. His business partners distanced themselves. Investors pulled out. Contracts were canceled. 2 major deals collapsed. The city council announced they'd be reviewing his development projects. Senator Blackwell issued a statement condemning Preston's moral failings and returning all campaign contributions. Everyone loved watching a powerful man fall. Corinne's father had flown back to San Francisco but called twice a day, checking on her. Melissa Chen had texted once, "If you need to talk, I'm here," but Corinne hadn't responded. What would they talk about? How Melissa was probably already gossiping about this to everyone they knew. In daylight, Corinne could see him more clearly. He was tall, at least 6 feet, with Preston's build, lean and athletic. His hair was dark brown, slightly wavy, falling across his forehead. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, carefully ironed, with sneakers that had been cleaned but couldn't hide their age. A backpack hung from one shoulder. He saw her immediately and paused, uncertainty crossing his face. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked over. "Mrs. Ashford." "Corinne, please. Mrs. Ashford makes me feel like someone's angry teacher." A small smile flickered across his face. Up close, the resemblance to Preston was undeniable, the same shape of jaw, the same color eyes. But there was something in Lucas's expression that Preston had never possessed. Openness, vulnerability, a kind of raw honesty that came from having nothing to hide. "Thank you for meeting me," Lucas said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming." An awkward silence stretched between them. Corinne gripped her coffee cup, studying this young man who destroyed her life and somehow made her grateful for it. "I've been watching the news," Lucas said finally. "It's been intense." "That's one word for it." "I'm sorry. I knew it would be bad, but I didn't think it would explode like this. I thought maybe a few people would care, maybe it would embarrass Preston a little. I didn't think," he gestured helplessly. "This. It's not your fault. You told the truth. The truth was always going to hurt. That's Preston's fault, not yours." Lucas looked at her with something like relief. "Everyone keeps acting like I'm some kind of hero, like I exposed corruption or fought injustice, but I didn't do it for noble reasons. I did it because I was angry, because my mom died and I was alone and I wanted Preston to feel even a fraction of the pain he caused us." "That's honest." "Yeah, well." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture so reminiscent of Preston that Corinne felt a pang. "Honesty is all I have left. That and a scholarship that might disappear if USC decides I'm too controversial." What? Corinne leaned forward. They can't do that. You earned that scholarship. PR department is evaluating the situation. That's code for we don't want the bad publicity. I've been working toward USC since freshman year. 4.2 GPA, 2 jobs, volunteering, essays, interviews, everything. And now it might all be gone because I embarrassed a rich guy. The injustice of it hit Corinne like a physical blow. This boy, young man, had done everything right, worked himself to exhaustion, maintained perfect grades while supporting his dying mother, earned a scholarship through pure merit, and now he might lose it all because he dared to stand up to his father. That's not going to happen, Corinne heard herself say. I'll make sure of it. Lucas blinked. What? I'll call the university. I'll donate money if I have to. I'll make such a fuss they'll be afraid not to honor your scholarship. You earned it. You deserve it. And I won't let Preston take that from you too. Mrs. Ashe, Corinne, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do, because you're right about one thing. Preston has taken enough. From you, from your mother, from me. He's taken and given nothing back. That stops now. Lucas stared at her, his eyes shining. Why would you help me? I ruined your life. No, Preston ruined my life. You just made me see it. Corinne set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. I want to tell you about the woman I was 3 days ago. I want you to understand who I'm apologizing for. You don't need to apologize. Please let me say this. Lucas nodded slowly. Corinne took a breath. 3 days ago, I was Corinne Ashford. I lived in a mansion worth $20 million. I threw parties that cost more than most people earn in a year. I spent my time shopping, getting spa treatments, having lunch with friends who weren't really friends. I knew everyone in Lowe's Angels Society. I sat on charity boards and attended fundraisers and wrote checks to causes I barely understood because it was expected. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I told myself I was a good person. I donated to charity. I was polite to service workers. I never hurt anyone deliberately. But I was blind, Lucas. Willfully, deliberately blind. I lived in a bubble of wealth so complete that I couldn't see anything outside it. I didn't want to see. That doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't it? Corinne's voice was sharp. While I was spending $40,000 on a dress I wore once, your mother was dying of cancer because she couldn't afford treatments. While I was remodeling my kitchen for the 3rd time, you were working 2 jobs to help pay rent. While I was throwing parties to impress people I didn't like, you were taking the bus to school because you couldn't afford a car. You didn't know. I didn't want to know. That's worse. I had the resources to help people like your mother. I could have donated to cancer research, funded free clinics, supported programs for low-income families. But I didn't. I spent my money on appearances and status and impressing other wealthy people who didn't care about anyone but themselves. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mom always said rich people weren't evil. She said they were just disconnected, living in a different world. She never hated Preston, you know. She was angry at him, disappointed in him, but she didn't hate him. She said hate took too much energy. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Lucas's voice cracked slightly. She worked so hard, 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She made sure I always had what I needed for school, made sure I could focus on my education. She said education was the way out, the way to a better life. She was right, but she never got to see it. She died 2 weeks before I graduated high school. I'm so sorry. The thing that kills me, Lucas continued, wiping his eyes, is that she protected him, Preston. She never told me his full name until the end. Never let me try to contact him. She said it would only make things harder. She took his money because she needed it to survive, but she never asked for more. Never threatened to expose him. She just endured because she loved him once. And she didn't want to be the person who ruined someone else's life. Corinne felt tears on her own cheeks. She was a better person than all of us. Yeah, she was. They sat in silence, 2 people bound by their connection to a man who'd failed them both. The coffee shop hummed around them with quiet life. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of Spanish conversation, children laughing. Finally, Corinne said, "Tell me about her, your mother. I want to know who she was." Lucas looked surprised. Then slowly he began to talk. Maria Santos had immigrated from Mexico at 19, following her sister to Los Angeles in search of better opportunities. She'd worked her way up from dishwasher to waitress at the country club where she met Preston. She was 22, beautiful, full of dreams. Preston was 25, charming, handsome, seemingly kind. He pursued Maria with intensity, promising her everything. She fell hard. When she got pregnant, Preston promised to marry her, promised to tell his family, promised they'd build a life together. Then his father died, leaving him a substantial trust fund and control of the family business. Suddenly, Preston had expectations to meet, a reputation to uphold, a future that didn't include a pregnant waitress from Mexico. He came to her apartment one night, Lucas said, his voice distant. Told her he couldn't marry her, that his family would never accept it, that he'd lose everything. But he promised to support us financially. He made her sign papers saying she'd never contact his family, never tell anyone who he was, never interfere with his life. In exchange, he'd send money every month. How much? Corinne asked, though she dreaded the answer. $500, sometimes a bit more on my birthday or Christmas, maybe $8,000 a year total. Corinne did quick mental math. Over 18 years, that was less than $150,000. Preston spent more than that on his cars. His watch collection was worth more. The wine cellar alone. That's nothing, she said, anger building in her chest. He spent more on his golf club membership. To him, yeah, to us it meant making rent, buying groceries, keeping the lights on. Lucas smiled sadly. Mom was always so careful with money. She budgeted every penny, shopped at discount stores, cut coupons, made everything stretch as far as it could go. While Preston threw money away on pointless luxuries. I didn't know any different. We were poor, but lots of people in our neighborhood were poor. I thought that was just life. It wasn't until high school that I really understood the gap, when I started noticing where my classmates lived, what kind of cars their parents drove, the opportunities they had just because of money. Corinne thought about her own childhood, middle class but comfortable. Her father had built his fortune through hard work, yes, but also through opportunities and advantages that came from being white, male, and born in America. She'd inherited some of that privilege, then multiplied it by marrying Preston. She'd never struggled, never really wanted for anything. "What do you want?" she asked Lucas. "From this, from Preston, from life." Lucas considered the question carefully. "I want to finish high school, go to USC, study computer science, get a good job, maybe start my own company someday. I want to build something, something real, something I earned. Not revenge against Preston. I got my revenge. Everyone knows what he did now. His reputation is destroyed. That's enough." Lucas leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I don't want his money, Corinne. I don't want anything from him except acknowledgement. I wanted him to admit that my mother mattered, that I matter, that he can't just pretend we never existed." "You got that?" "Yeah, but it doesn't feel the way I thought it would. I thought I'd feel victorious or satisfied or something. Instead, I just feel empty, tired. My mom is still dead. I'm still alone. Exposing Preston didn't change any of that." Corinne reached across the table and took his hand. Lucas flinched slightly, surprised by the gesture, then relaxed. "You're not alone," she said firmly. "I know I can't replace your mother. I know I'm basically a stranger. But you don't have to do this by yourself. Let me help, please." "Why? What do you get out of it?" "The chance to do something right. The chance to be the person I should have been all along." Corinne squeezed his hand. "And maybe, selfishly, a chance to have some kind of relationship with someone genuine, someone real. Everyone in my old life was fake, including me. I don't want to be that person anymore." Lucas studied her face, searching for deception or hidden motives. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. They talked for another hour. Karen learned about Lucas's interests: coding, chess, science fiction. His plans: artificial intelligence research, maybe startups. His fears: not living up to his mother's sacrifices, failing, being alone. He was intelligent, thoughtful, surprisingly mature for 18. Karen found herself genuinely liking him. When they finally stood to leave, Karen pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I'm serious about helping with USC. And if you need anything at all, you call me. Deal. Deal. Outside, the late morning sun was bright. Karen put on sunglasses, aware that cameras might still be following her. Lucas noticed her caution and frowned. Is it really bad, the media attention? It's intense, but manageable. I've been staying at a hotel to avoid the reporters camped outside the house. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. None of this is your fault. Karen looked at this young man, Preston's son, her husband's child, proof of betrayal, and felt only compassion. Lucas, I mean what I said. I'm going to help you. And not because I feel guilty or because I want good publicity, because you deserve it. Lucas's eyes shone. Thank you, that means thank you. They parted ways, Lucas back to his apartment, Karen to her hotel. As she drove, Karen felt something unfamiliar: purpose. For 20 years she drifted through life, pursuing status and approval without ever asking what she actually wanted. Now suddenly she had a goal that mattered: helping this boy, this young man, build the future his mother had dreamed of for him. It wouldn't erase her failures, wouldn't undo her years of willful blindness, but it was something, a start. At a red light, Karen's phone rang. Her lawyer, Sheila. Karen, we have a problem. Her stomach dropped. What? Preston's lawyers are fighting the divorce. They're claiming you're mentally unstable due to the stress of the scandal. They want to delay proceedings and contest the asset division. On what grounds? They're arguing that your relationship with Lucas Santos constitutes a conflict of interest, that you're being manipulated by him to punish Preston unfairly. Karen's hand tightened on the steering wheel. That's ridiculous. Of course it is, but it's going to make things messy. We're talking months of litigation now instead of weeks. Expensive, public, ugly. Are you prepared for that? Karen thought about Lucas, working 2 jobs to pay for his mother's cancer treatments. She thought about Maria Santos, protecting Preston's reputation even as she died. She thought about her own comfortable life, built on lies and maintained by looking the other way. Yes, she said firmly. I'm prepared. Let Preston fight. Let it be public and ugly. I'm not backing down. Good, that's what I wanted to hear. We'll file our response tomorrow. And Karen, document everything with Lucas. Every conversation, every meeting. We need to prove your relationship with him is legitimate, not some kind of scheme. After they hung up, Karen sat in her parked car, processing the news. Preston was going to make this difficult. Of course he was. He'd never accepted consequences gracefully. But she was done making things easy for him. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. USC called. They want to meet with me next week about the scholarship. I'm scared they're going to take it away. Karen typed back immediately. I'll go with you if you want. We'll fight this together. The response came quickly. Really, you do that? Yes, I promise. Karen started the car and pulled back into traffic. Around her, Los Angeles buzzed with its usual frenetic energy, cars honking, people rushing, the city churning forward without pause. Her old life was gone, dissolved in scandal and revelation. But maybe, just maybe, she could build something better from the ruins. Something honest, something real. Something worth more than diamonds and dinner parties and perfectly curated appearances. As she drove, Karen passed a billboard advertising luxury condos in downtown LA. part of Preston's West Side development, the one that had displaced hundreds of low-income families. Her husband's face smiled down from the advertisement, professionally lit, selling dreams of exclusivity and status. By tomorrow, that billboard would probably be taken down. Preston's face would disappear from advertisements, from social pages, from the public sphere. His empire was crumbling, and Corinne felt no sympathy. Some falls were necessary. Some destructions cleared space for something better to grow. And in the wreckage of her marriage, in the ruins of her carefully constructed life, Corinne was discovering something she'd never had before, the possibility of becoming the person she should have been all along. The USC administration building loomed like a courthouse, all marble columns and brass fixtures designed to intimidate. Corinne walked beside Lucas up the wide steps, both of them silent, preparing for battle. It had been a week since their coffee shop meeting. A week of legal filings, media frenzy, and Preston's increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative. He'd gone on television, a calculated interview with a sympathetic anchor, playing the role of flawed but repentant man, claiming he'd made mistakes, but was committed to making amends. He hadn't contacted Lucas once. The interview had backfired spectacularly. Social media tore him apart. Former employees came forward with stories of his arrogance and cruelty. 3 women announced they were filing sexual harassment lawsuits. The facade cracked wider every day, revealing the rot underneath. Corinne's divorce proceedings had officially begun, and Preston was fighting with everything he had. His lawyers painted her as vindictive, emotionally unstable, manipulated by a gold-digging teenager. They subpoenaed her bank records, her phone records, her therapy sessions from 5 years ago when she'd briefly seen a counselor about anxiety. Sheila had warned her, "They're going to make you look crazy, that's their only play." "Let them try," Corinne had said. Now, climbing these steps with Lucas, she felt the weight of that decision. If USC revoked his scholarship because of her, because she'd inserted herself into his life, she'd never forgive herself. Lucas wore a blazer she'd bought him, arguing that he needed proper interview clothes. He'd resisted at first, proud and stubborn, but eventually accepted when she'd framed it as practical rather than charity. His hair was neatly trimmed, his shoes were new but modest, and he carried a folder with his transcripts, recommendation letters, and scholarship documents. "You ready?" Corinne asked as they reached the entrance. "No, but let's do it anyway." Inside, they were directed to a conference room on the 3rd floor. 2 people waited there. Dean Barbara Morrison, a severe woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that revealed nothing, and James Chen, the director of admissions, younger and more nervous, already sweating despite the air conditioning. "Mr. Santos, Mrs. Ashford." Dean Morrison's voice was cool, professional. "Please sit." They sat. Corinne felt Lucas tense beside her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. She wanted to reach over and squeeze his shoulder reassuringly but restrained herself. He needed to handle this himself. She was here for support, not to take over. "Mr. Santos," Dean Morrison began, "I'm sure you understand why we've called this meeting. The university has received considerable attention regarding your situation." "My situation," Lucas interrupted, his voice controlled but hard. "You mean the fact that I'm Preston Ashford's son,